Okay, you may have noticed that there were already grooves in the pieces before I glued the sides together. I did that groove on both the inside and outside surfaces. I used a 90-degree V-point bit. The reason I did it before I glued it up, I already had the bit set up. I like to mill these grooves on the inside, and when I separate the lid from the bottom, it will give me a chamfer all the way inside the box. By doing it on the outside first, I will make sure the two match. So that's the 90-degree V-point bit. On the inside, what I did before I glued the box together, I took some 3M stick-it paper, I think this is 240 grit, and I just put it over a piece of scrap shoe mold, and that gave me a 90-degree surface. I sanded the insides clean, and I'll do that again on the outside before we proceed. The next step was I had a veneer overhang, and I used a flush trimming bit with a handheld router, ran across the outside. I wasn't too much concerned about chip out around the corners, primarily because I knew I was going to pillow the box over. So that's the flush trim bit with a handheld router. The next step, and I don't know whether this will show up on camera or not, but I milled a finger groove. The first box I built of this, it was just a uniform chamfer like this all the way around, and honestly it made the end user really confused on how do I open this thing, because there's hinges on one side and magnetic catch on the other with rare earth magnets, and it was hard to find out where to open it. So I milled some finger grooves, and I used a 1/4 inch round nose bit, or core box bit I guess. And I used this in a router table. I set up some stop blocks and milled those surfaces just by dropping the box on, run it across, and I'll show a short video clip of that now. Okay, once those grooves are milled, I'm using a Queen Anne bit to get the pillow effect, and I just use that in a router table. It's pretty basic. It does a nice job and gives me the profile I want. So now I'm ready to get set up to sand the sides, and before I separate the lid. I don't like sanding this before or after I separate the lid, because you just don't necessarily get a uniform surface. Okay, I've got the bandsaw set up to separate the lid from the top. This is a new blade for me. It's the Lennox Kerf Master. This particular blade is 5/8 of an inch and has a kerf of 16 thousandths. So I should be able to get a nice clean cut. One of the things I discovered was the carbide tip blade, while it had a much wider kerf, it also, while it gave a wonderful cut while resawing, when it's cutting thin wood, I noticed that it was kind of a rough edge. So let's see how this Kerf Master does. Okay, this gave a much smoother cut. And now that I've separated the lids from the bottoms, the next step is to remove the bandsaw blade marks. The way I do that is use a flat surface such as MDF, or in this case melamine, and I adhere a self-adhesive paper to it. This particular brand is the 3M Stick It, and I just swirl it around. I'll progress up through probably 220 grit on this. This is 120 grit, and until I remove all the bandsaw blade marks. The advantage of this method, as opposed to sanding each individual surface, is that it keeps all four sides all in the same plane, and that will give you a perfect fit to the lid, assuming of course you do the lid in the same manner. So I'll continue on with this, flatten the boxes, and then I'll move on to the next step.